Hello, and welcome to The Dive, presented by Squeaky Ass Devs.
Mine doesn't do it.
And stop it! Both of you are the worst type of people. This is season 6, episode 11. We're gonna start now, so these idiots stop moving their laptops around. I can't take it. I'm actually gonna go crazy. Mark, there was an article that came out. You worked with Peter Zhang. Did you loan him any money?
No, never.
For the readers who do not know what we're referring to, please go in depth.
For the illiterate, the article came out. Peter Zhang was released last Thursday. There was a bit of a period. People were like, what's going on? There was a tweet by TSM. Eventually, it got clarified in an article by Richard Lewis and Dextero about what specifically happened. There were two kinds of things to cover. One was acting as an agent for some players. Supposedly, this is the allegation. Peter disputed pretty much most of the claims, talking with them, but that was one of them. It was like Sword Art specifically. He got a cut of that deal, supposedly, as well as did some things for Sword Art financially. Apparently, he's done that for Yurson as well and some other players. And then the other thing is that supposedly he's been loaning money from players, asking them for
borrowing,
loaning,
stealing, or I guess asking for. Is it because I guess the point of contention is that didn't pay it back.
So in the article, I think it said that most players had received their money back actually.
Oh, okay. So it is a borrowing situation.
Yeah, I think it's a little more like I read the article and I felt like that was trying to be fair, at least, because it did speak to Peter and and supposedly Peter was like, hey, look at all my receipts and stuff, and was trying to show stuff. So who exactly knows? But it's definitely, no matter what, in the position that he's in, not acceptable. Yeah, like as a coach, you cannot be doing this.
The person who's deciding if you play or not, potentially, or even have a job or not, or a contract or not, is asking you for money, right? And like that is just such a weird situation to be put in for a young player. I think most people would feel that they had to say yes, or that they could potentially like really damage their career. And so I think there's a lot of kind of like stuff there that's not really acceptable. And I mean, the Sword Art thing as well, like, and whether he debates that or not, like I'd heard that was true. I'd heard, as well with Yurson. And it's like, if you are the person deciding what player joins your team and you're also acting as the agent, you're kind of like that's really somewhat weird too, right? And that's kind of like murky waters where it's you're deciding that we want to sign this player and you're getting paid for deciding that you want to sign the player. So it does make you wonder, it like opens a whole can of worms of like, ooh, would you have chosen this person if you weren't representing them? Like, would there be someone else that you would have wanted instead if you weren't getting a cut? And even if all of that is not true, it makes you wonder. And that's kind of like, I think, a really weird situation for TSM to be in.
I just think that it's crazy that we have another hit at some other seedy, murky water style stuff that's going on at TSM and has apparently, been going on for a while. So I just feel like the roller coaster of our TSM news week. I can't wait for the next episode, guys. What's going to happen next week?
You can't keep TSM's name out of your mouth. Like, 'cause here's the thing. They're either going to make the run for playoffs and we're going to lose our minds, or they're not, and they're probably going to make some roster changes and we'll still be talking about them. They're content machines. Yeah. You can't not talk about TSM.
It's pretty brutal, though, when you think about some of the impact that I think this has, because really my understanding is that largely the reason that TSM went the LPL route was because of Peter and his connections with the LPL and his connections with the players and, being able to like run the tryouts and stuff in China and have that whole system. Like, that's why they have a lot of the players that they have. And now he's gone, right? And like, what does that mean for the direction of the team? What does that mean for some of the players who likely signed on in part because Peter is here and was dealing with them? Like, that, the knock-on effects of that are what is the biggest news to me from this story, more than like, Peter did some things he shouldn't have and gotten fired. Like, honestly, most fans are probably like, who cares? I think it's one of those things where it's just like, it's a weird situation, right? Like, what does TSM do from here? Do they commit to LPL coming into, next year or whatever? Or is it going to be like everyone is gone from the LPL? Because obviously they brought in Shawi and all kinds of stuff, based on Peter's direction for the team.
Yeah, it's super weird. That, and as well as like, if the money wasn't returned to some of these players, like I just feel bad. I think that's the biggest thing.
I was asking that, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not accusing any.
No, I know. I'm saying like that was said, but who knows if all the money's gotten back to the right people? Because then it just also feels bad for a lot of the like academy developmental players and people who might have been ripped off. That you're like, well, they're not like that financially secure. Like a starting out pro player, they're not. Not everyone's double lift, or whoever they're set,
Yeah. I mean, if you're an academy, you're making some money, but definitely not a lot of money in most cases. So yeah, I mean, hopefully all of that end of it gets solved regardless.
Yeah.
That like whether or not he has already paid them back, hopefully he will pay them back, and at least the players are not out of pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then TSM fired him because of the alleged, agent stuff.
Agent thing.
basically.
Yeah.
But you know who is making money? Faker. And you know who's still winning games? T1. 18-0 for their series score, undefeated in LCK.
That's big news.
100%, not even leaving any 0.1 percentage chance that we don't see them at MSI. I'm very, very excited to see this squad.
Yeah, that's what I said when the Patriots lost the Super Bowl too. We went 18-0 in the regular season. Started struggling a little bit more in playoffs, and then suddenly Super Bowl rolls around. Drop that one. I know a lot of people were talking about, even we were saying a little bit last episode about the asterisk from all the COVID concerns and having to play sub rosters that they played against. They never had to put in subs, as far as I'm pretty sure they never had to. So
Yeah.
What I will say, as someone who has been a fan of teams who have had like asterisks put on their seasons, if I'm a fan of the team, I say, no, I don't acknowledge that asterisk. That's not like a thing that you can make me acknowledge. I don't acknowledge it at all. And if I'm not a fan of the team, I'm talking about that asterisk constantly. I think this is a fun part of sports. I think it gets under people's skin. I don't know why. It's like part of what makes it fun is like debating, they deserve it, they not deserve it, that kind of thing. If you're a fan of T1, rub it in the other people's face. It will tilt the hell out of them. And if you're not a fan of T1, you want to get under a fan skin, bring up that asterisk. It's just like, it's such a great part of sports to like just watch these people lose like their minds over this, like, is it legit or is it not legit?
I mean, I think it's an incredible accomplishment regardless,
absolutely.
right? And I think that is kind of where I stand, is that this is an amazing accomplishment. Is it as meaningful as if all of the teams that they beat were at full strength? Of course not. But that's not on T1, right? Like, that's not their fault. So I still think it's an incredible accomplishment. I think largely people will judge them based on how playoffs go and how potentially MSI goes.
Yeah.
Because if they were to lose, say, to like Gen G in playoffs and not even make it to MSI, everyone's going to say, well, knew it. It was fraudulent, right? And if they absolutely turbo stun playoffs and then go and slam everyone in MSI and win there, everyone's like, well, clearly they would have done it anyway, right? So I think either way, people will probably be very like kind of like just judging based on what happens afterwards, because you can't really know, right? Especially like the Gen G series where they had to play against Gen G who had subs, and that's supposed to be their biggest competition, right? And they did lose games, obviously. Like if you don't follow the LCK, it's best of 3. They lost, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games. So they lost it. They lost some games. Obviously they won 36, I guess, and lost 7 then, if Games Legends match history is right. But it's pretty impressive. And especially to me, it's really cool, not only that Faker is this good after so long. Like, he's not the best player on his team probably anymore, but it's just like, I think consistency at the pro level is incredibly hard. And that is the bigger reason, not age, that people aren't around for so long. It's not that they're not capable. It's that having this single-minded focus for a decade to be able to stay at the top of your field is so incredibly difficult. It requires this to be your whole life. And not a lot of people can do that for a really long time. And Faker is now, going on a full decade of being at the top of the sport. And I think that's so incredible. And it's also been really exciting to see some of the new players coming up and becoming true stars, right? Like, Keria is the first ever support MVP from the LCK. I think largely that's because the LCK MVP system was horrible for a lot of years. And now it was actually like voting instead of like just MVP points, which were always kind of fraudulent.
Yep.
But I think it's cool to see that history made as well.
Their bottom lane as a whole is one of the most scary things for teams, even thinking about, prepping and stuff for MSI. and what I'm most excited for. And I mean, okay, so I was going to refer to the top laner, but I'm going to refer to him as Zeus.
I refuse to call him Zeus.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to take a moment here. And I have heard on one of the VODs, you know, the explanation from the LCK casters, because there was already another player named Zeus. That was why they went with this, you know, pronunciation of the name. We will have to discuss when we get to international events.
There's only going to be one
with
Zeus
all of
at
the
him.
There is a Greek god of which this has been named after.
So I again, that's going to be a longer discussion what we end up doing, you know, on broadcast. But for this podcast, I'm calling him Zeus because I've decided, and we don't have to have a discussion.
I rebel against that notion.
You know, his talent and is mostly to me about his growth and how quickly he showed dominant form on the top side. But yeah, to me, really, when we see them at international event, by the way.
Them versus C9, Gumayushi versus Berserker, the
oh
rematch of the understudy.
That's what I've been waiting for. They already did that one interview that we referred to with Guma when he was talking about you know, looking over his shoulder at Berserker and being kind of glad that Berserker went to NA so that he's not going to come take his spot, basically. That would be so cool if we get to see them play each other at international event.
Yeah, I feel like probably power rank number one. I haven't looked at anyone's power rankings recently. I assume T1 is at the top of everyone's list. They deserve it. They're incredible. On the Faker point, the other thing I wanted to throw out there was the longevity is what makes him the best of all time. I think peak-wise, you can always debate it, but like in every other region, the player who was the best has shifted. And it feels like Faker's never really been unseated for long.
Yeah.
And that's what's the most insane thing. And where like GOATs in most sports come from is not like, oh, other people didn't win titles during their reigns. You know, like people won championships around Jordan. They won around Wayne Gretzky. I don't know, like throw a name out there. They lost titles at points, but the thing was that they were always at the top for the entire time that they basically played.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Faker's done and why he is going to be so unchallenged for so long in this sport.
I think it's like almost unseatable, right? It's
Yeah.
one of those things that because especially like because he was around so early, like and through this kind of era where mid laners could truly just solo carry games with just like absolute domination of their opponents. I think people who are around in that era, it's harder to challenge now. I think that the overall level goes up over time and it makes it more difficult to have that massive discrepancy. And that's where you get into kind of some of these discussions that you have with sports too, where it's like, well, is Will Chamberlain not better than Michael Jordan because he scored way more points? Well, he played against bad people.
Bill Russell won 11 championships in 13 years.
There's no contest. It's Faker for sure.
But I'm just saying, Mark's talking about like, oh, he may not be unseated for a long time. For now, obviously, everyone is going to agree it's Faker. But I'm saying like, even in 20 years or 30 years or whatever, I still think it's going to be Faker just because I think it's so difficult to equal his body of work for such a long time and to have had such a period of dominance. Like even though now most people will not tell you that Faker is the best mid laner in the world, and I think that's been true for a lot of years. I think you know, maybe the last time people were talking about him as like literally the best mid laner in the world was like, I don't know, 2016, 2017, somewhere around there probably. But he has always been at or near the top of his craft, and I think it's incredibly impressive, especially in esports where in League of Legends in particular, when you look at LCK and you look at LPL, it is constantly new young players pushing out the older players and replacing this generation, right? It's guys like Faker and Rookie and people like that have been around for a long time and really been truly incredible.
Yeah. Well, we had a bunch of interviews about the strength of the LCS as well, in particular. You know, we had Berserker was on Reddit, River was on Reddit. I actually liked I liked this discussion as it comes up a lot of the time of you know, what roles have really you know, currently have the strongest strength basically in North America. River did an interview with our good old friend Pirate Technics, used to be a LEC caster that we would meet up with at international events quite a lot. And he was really positive on NA jungles, which at the beginning of the year, we were talking about as, along with top lane, being what look like our most robust, our strongest roles as well. Do you guys still think that jungle and top lane are probably the two strongest?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think support is also really good in NA in general. Because that like what led me to believe that was I want to say this was a freak, but we were basically having this conversation of like, oh, like, there's like the all pro team who's like the all Joe team, like worst in every role. And it was actually like kind of hard thinking about support to even put someone there, right?
Yeah.
Like who's the like, you got stuck with him, haha, support, like doesn't really feel like there
I think
is.
part of it is that, in our discussion of like older players still having really strong showings, Afromu and Biofrost coming back and being as good as they are also definitely led its hands towards like you're saying we don't have the bottom is actually a pretty high floor for supports.
To me, mid and AD are the like weaker roles.
Really?
I think. Pardon?
I said, really?
Okay.
I'm surprised you think AD is a weaker role.
I don't know if you're being sarcastic or not.
No, I'm not.
So I think the bottom end I do think is like weaker for sure. I think that like it doesn't have the same depth, right? Like I think that some of the best players in the role are really strong, but I do think that some of the worst performing ADs like are pretty weak when you compare to a lot of the other regions. Personally,
so for me, it's easily the solo lanes. I think our top lane pool is actually pretty weak too. Yeah, like outside the top 4, I think it kind of drops off a cliff. I mean, you can put Summit, Bwipo.
The bottom is definitely pretty
Impact,
weak in top lane.
Like Someday, that sounds like a really good group, but then when I don't want to throw too much shade at people, but like,
I mean, Fake God and stuff.
Fake
for
God,
sure.
Jenkins,
Kumo,
Revenge, Kumo, like,
yep.
I would take Neo, Johnson. Like, if you took the top laner compared to the AD carry, even on their own teams in those situations, Fake God to Neo. Neo is hands down way better in his position.
I think that's a lopsided.
Yeah,
team,
but
though.
Luger and Jenkins.
Yeah.
Again, Kumo or Johnson. Like, you start playing that game, and I actually think top lane in the bottom half of the league is much weaker than the AD carry. I think AD carry is actually pretty good.
That's fair. I guess I really do think that the best top laners, like we have a number of those top laners that even just the ones that you rhymed off, I think would do well internationally.
Yes.
Right.
The
And
top
to
end
me,
is
that means a lot, like for North America to have us like the solo laners that I could see going to international. Like if we're like thinking about Worlds or whatever, I think the top laners will hold up, right? And that is something that I guess kind of like is leading me to that. But to your point, yeah, the bottom end of top lane is pretty weak. So maybe I am being a little bit unfair about talking about through that lens when that's how I'm looking at AD. But it's interesting. I mean, River's comment was when he was on PSG Talon, he obviously went to the international tournaments. He thought NA is kind of a weaker region. But then once I played in the LCS, out of all 5 positions, I think jungle is super strong. And he says, I think the league is super competitive. And overall, the jungle role is really good in NA. So he obviously was like a bit more impressed, I think, with how competitive the league was in general. But I do think jungle is definitely strong. And that's where I think a lot of like, when you think over the years, that's where a lot of the like NA talent has actually been. Even back to like all the Mike Young memes and everything. Right, like when we won Rift Rivals and whatever, there was a big discussion about that, and that's been over the years one place that has been pinpointed of like like NA is actually maybe like better than EU at times in this type of thing.
I don't know. Kobe looked at me when I was drinking water. Sorry about that. I think that it's interesting because one, I feel like this is something you often hear is like players come over and like, oh, it's not as trash as I thought it was. It is funny when it's like, oh, my own role is the hard one. So, I've come over here. And the other thing I'll say is the PCS also has talked mad smack about NA over the time. I know River's Korean, but he played in the PCS for a little bit. And it's just like one of those things where it's like, why do you look down on NA so much? We outperform you internationally all the time.
Well, and it's not just that retrospective. Like every player that has come over to the LCS and has done interviews afterwards, Perks gave interviews, Niski gave interviews, all these guys after playing here, maybe not every game. I don't know. Alfari probably did not have a
non-negligible percentage.
Alfari says the same thing about you though. Alfari is just like, everyone sucks except me. I'm the best.
But the point is there are a bunch of these interviews of players that did come over and then after leaving gave very similar testimonies basically of being like, oh yeah, I mean, I went in with a similar negative attitude towards North America, and after playing there, wow, it's way more competitive. It's a lot better. It's, and basically have that same sentiment. So I find it interesting, but it also makes still just like, it's still so frustrating that there is that looming negativity that causes this whole, that, you know, necessitates this whole cycle of people having to come over and actually play here. And then they're like, okay, fine, I'm convinced.
Yep.
I mean, I think they were talking about this on JLXP, but like TL goes 3-3 at Worlds for the last 3 Worlds. Is it correct? Like
Something like that, yeah.
Oh, last Worlds, if they got to choose their tiebreaker, I swear to God, we would have had 2 teams out. Okay.
My point is just that, like, clearly they are a competent team if internationally they go and they are like doing decently. Not that they're the best.
And
but
100 Thieves also went 3-3. We have
like,
tons of teams that go 3-3.
They like, we might be the weakest of the major regions, but it's not like we're a joke. And I think people like meme it up, social media memes it up. People just are hyperbolic in general. And so like players like, oh God, they're so trash, blah, blah, blah. And then they come over here and they're like, wait, they're not as bad as I thought they were. And it is frustrating for people who are in this ecosystem to be like, come on, like, I have no problem admitting we're the weakest of the major regions. Now, can you admit that we're not like dumpster tier and like don't deserve to be in the same conversation as you guys, and you come over here and you can't dominate us? Like, what happened?
Yeah. I also think one of the things that North America often doesn't get credit for is I actually think that like our league has quite a lot of depth, right? Like there's some pretty competitive teams that are near the bottom. Like Giloto was giving interviews about that. And I think that's been true for a lot of years, you know, like especially compared to the PCS, but compared to, I think, a lot of leagues, like our bottom tier teams are like teams that are often more competitive than some of the bottom teams in other leagues. And I think that is true. And, you know, like for River coming over from PCS, so it's like, yeah, okay, at the top, almost always in the PCS, even when we look back to when it was like LMS and Flash Wolves and stuff, it's like, there's always a couple teams that are really quite good and absolutely turbo stomp everyone else in the league. And that doesn't really happen in LCS, or at least very rarely is a team so dominant like that, right? Like
because they're so bad at the top. We just can't make good teams, don't you know?
Yeah. Speaking of competitive regions, we had our top teams get upset this last weekend. We got a question about it from Noah.
Hey guys, my name's Noah, and my question is, with the top 2 teams both dropping a game this week, which do you think is more worrying? Cloud9 losing almost every part of the game versus TSM, who's last place, even though they did 2-0, or Team Liquid dropping a game to FlyQuest, who's doing okay, I'd say, mid-split.
So my first initial reaction was for sure the Cloud9 losing to TSM one, both because TSM has just been dead last, 100% the worst team in the league. But also, that game was so many mistakes from Cloud9 that just seemed really weird because we have not seen those types of mistakes from them all year, basically. No, not tracking enemy movements at all. No extra vision, just getting picked off and split pushing over and over again. I felt like I was losing my mind casting that game and watching it happen and watching it unfold. It was just
someone pranked you and it was a different
team. It was another prank. And it was just like, I was talking earlier about this, like every week we've got some weird TSM stuff going on. It was like, all right, well, it's just another like, sure, of course this happens.
The only thing they expect.
They announced that they're firing one of their coaches, and this is right after the drama was fresh. And I was like, oh my God, what happened? And there's all these like rumors around the money exchanging hands and the agent deals and all this shady stuff. And like, oh my God, how long has this been going on? And now they fired Peter right before, and we're going into these games, and now they beat Cloud9, and we're like, holy shit. But a lot of it I remember too was, Cloud9 making some, like I said, mistakes that we have not seen from them. But the Team Liquid one, I also thought was pretty concerning, but I was more shocked, I would say, by the Cloud9 one.
I mean, my initial reaction is neither worry me, but I know that's not the question. I think both teams are still the best 2 in the league. So if anyone
both teams are the best team in the league,
they're best 2 in the league. They're still the top 2. I mean, like 100 Thieves is flying up the rankings. They're on a 5 or 7 game win streak or something. I forget what it is. It's long. It's big.
But are they flying up your power rankings?
No, I mean
to 3rd probably.
They were always kind of 3rd though in power rankings for me. But I think nothing this weekend changed that power rankings. But that wasn't really the question. It's which of the 2 is more concerning. I would say the Team Liquid one because we have, whereas you're saying this is shocking that Cloud9 lost like this because we normally don't see them do this. That allows me to be like, it's more of an aberration. You know, probably looked over TSM in the schedule. Maybe didn't have their heads in the game, whatever. Team Liquid has done a lot of games like this. They have almost lost a lot of games, and it finally happened where they throw this lead and top lane just kind of being idiots. It's just like not respecting what their enemy team can do to them. And that's happened a lot of times. And they finally lost the game because of it, but they should have lost the Immortals one. There's an EG one where they gave a huge lead up in a top lane throw and lost a Baron. Like, they've done this a bunch of times. And that's why for me, that's more worrying, because it's a trend that is still going on.
Yeah, I think TL has had a few games where if they're not like drafting, their traditional style comps, where like they've experimented a lot, which I want to say is a positive.
Yes.
And I'm not going to hold it against them too much, because this was, again, I think them kind of trying something out. They created a massive lead, but they basically drafted no real engage, right? Like, you could look for a pick with Ahri. Yeah, you could like maybe Trundle pillar someone in and try to like, Taric stun them, but it's not real engage, right?
Taric doesn't have anyone to set him up in this comp, and Taric hates that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's no dive, which also makes, I think, getting Taric ultimates that are good really, really difficult. Like, I think that Taric, when paired with hard engage, it's a lot easier to get a good value ult, because you force the other team to fight you on this Hecarim ult or on this Malphite ult or whatever, where you are immune, and they kind of like, get put into a weird situation. But they played this comp where they didn't really have any engage. They're playing double marksman, and they get way ahead. But like, you have to snowball the game with that kind of comp, because the only way you can actually beat FlyQuest comp is by making them come to you, by being ahead and being first to the objective. Whereas FlyQuest had really good scaling. They had Tristan and Veigar, two of the best scaling carries. They have multiple forms of hard engage with this Gragas plus Aphromoo on the Nautilus. Like, they had a lot of tools to actually dominate in a 5v5 if the game ever were to get to parity. And it didn't even need to get fully to parity because of their advantages in 5v5 composition, right? It just really took that one TP flank from Tukoi where TL overstayed top. TL at that point was up like 7k or 7.5k. And off of that, they actually got a 5k gold swing with the bounties they took, the shutdowns they got, the Baron they took. And then it's like, ooh, we lost, didn't we? Right? It hit that point where Johnson was already farming really well. He was huge. Tukoi, I think, had another really good Veigar game. It was very reminiscent of his previous one against 100 Thieves, where they were also down big. And he got like one big pick where he just like killed off Abadaga instantly, and then killed off one other person. It was like, all of a sudden, you just kind of win.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends how you're looking at this question. Because if it's like, oh, which one is more concerning? Like, which team are you now more concerned with in their placement in the LCS? Because I have Cloud9 as my best team. So I guess by that measure, I would say it was a less concerning game. But then I was looking at it like, my best team, my best rank 1 team just lost to the worst, rank 10 team. So I guess shocking, yes. Maybe not, as concerned overall. I do think, for my money heading into playoffs, Cloud9 are my favorites to win spring. And we can actually, Super Week is kind of a cool week for us to like re-up on our on like predictions, basically, and kind of we can do like Super Week / how do you think they're gonna end up doing towards playoffs type of thing also.
Well, since you brought that up, you have to mention, with TSM going 2-0 this week, they have 4 wins, which is more than Freak predicted. He's officially wrong.
It is.
Just had to bring that up after so many bets have been thrown in my face and Raz's face. And like,
this wasn't even a bet. It was just literally someone asked him how many wins they would have, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, still, I got to bring it up.
I thought he was really wrong when he predicted 3 wins, like really wrong.
Yeah. And then he looked pretty right.
And then he looked pretty right for a while. And I was like, I even told him, I was like, I doubted you. Like, you're looking like you were on point with that. But they have the 2-0 weekend. That's huge for TSM. And yes, I think there's still theoretically a tiebreaker scenario where they could make it into playoffs. But it's like really weird and extremely unlikely. At the very least, from TSM point of view, this was like, hey, now you have something to be happy about. Now you have something that you can maybe say, oh, okay, like at least we're building towards something. You could see like the team is, has some potential there. There still may be some big changes, who knows, coming into summer or whatnot. But at least this gave like a glimmer of hope, I think, for TSM fans. And I think that was like a really exciting part of the upset. I know I never really answered the question, but I guess it's like I don't find either of them super concerning. I think if one were to be more concerning, I think it's TL, because it's been more of a pattern similar to what you guys were saying. Like, they've had a number of games where they try to draft something a little bit different and lose. But I don't really care, because I'm actually happy that they're experimenting, and I think they're going to come into playoffs with a clear view of what is the best comp for TL, right? And that's where I think you really get the benefit out of experimenting a lot in regular season. It's not actually the best strategy if you want to go flawless in the regular season.
Mm-hmm. Would either of you take Team Liquid if we played a best of 5 between Cloud9 and Team Liquid right now?
Probably not.
It's
Because
really hard.
I feel like nobody would now, because especially the Cloud9 victory is so fresh off their recent matchup.
Yeah.
I think the point that Azael's making about experimentation is a big one, because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. Maybe they're crushing scrims with like 1 or 2 styles of comp, and that's why they're branching out more. But like the hard playthrough Bwipo style does not look that good. Like he can carry, but the hard playthrough him with the Lucians, with the Jacks,
The Shyvana game. As well.
Shyvana game, the Viego game, the Lucian game, and the Jax game. Those are their losses,
Yeah.
right? It's all stuff where they're experimenting.
Yeah.
And so like that's why to me like neither of them are that big of a deal. The Cloud9 one was like, that's not the Cloud9 I know. Like they looked horrible. Like everything about that game was horrible. You're face checking. You have no vision control, which was how I took it. Was kind of like what Mark's saying. Was like, oops, guess you didn't take him serious. Like you played really bad, and TSM played way better than expected. They played a really good game and deserve credit, to kind of like catch the ball that was thrown. But neither of them were like, this team sucks now. Like time to redo the power rankings. I mean, I think TL could for sure still win. I think I probably wouldn't bet on them. I mean, I was predicting C9. It was really interesting because I saw a lot of mentions from C9 fans who were kind of unhappy about me saying I wasn't sure if Fudge was in my top 3, and saying, Azael hates C9, but I was like, I predicted C9 to win against TL like this weekend.
Against your hatred of Fudge, you still predicted them. It's incredible.
Exactly.
How good the rest
Overcame
of the team.
it. But it'll be exciting, right? I think the biggest question for me coming to playoffs is there a third team that can actually challenge?
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for when we're looking at 100 Thieves, to the point of them. I mean, each team is only 1 game behind the next one below them. We've got the stepping stones of Cloud9, Team Liquid, 100 Thieves. But I think 100 Thieves, people are looking at needing more of a big upswing in this Super Week if they have a good performance there.
Yeah. 100 Thieves, I was talking with someone about like how weird it is that they're only 1 game back from TL, but we're acting like they're just, they're like the dark horse third favorite. They don't look nearly as good. And I think there is some justification.
Quality of wins.
I think some of the ways in which they've lost as well.
Well, I also think lots of people, and us included, had very high expectations of coming in as defending champs, not making roster changes, and practicing and scrimming earlier than all the other teams. So those led to these very high expectations that are like, someone overhyping a movie to you, and then you go see it, and it's like still pretty good,
but it's not what you were sold on.
But it's not number 1. You're expecting number 1 in the LCS.
And the players themselves admitted like, FBI's like, we're not playing as well as we used to. Like I think the players have also been like, we are not holding up to our own standard.
I think for sure Abe and the bottom lane as a whole, both parts of it. Yeah. I had a big magnifying glass on Abadaga and Huhi, but FBI as well. I do think Someday and Closer have been crushing it. So that's also kind of why it's weird, because it's like only part of the team you really feel like. And that maybe is also why they still have so many wins.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Is like, okay, this could still be a title contender if those other things that aren't going great fix themselves. And they did win 5 in a row, but they should have lost that Golden Guardians game. And like, I was still like tepid, like 1 foot in. Like, yeah, you guys are the 3rd best team, but because there's really no other candidates. But you also are not like, we're the 3rd best team, try and get over us.
Yeah.
FlyQuest, I dare you. And it's like, they could.
The biggest thing for me has just really been less comparing 100 Thieves to C9 and TL and more comparing 100 Thieves to how good I thought they were last year. Because, like, to your point, Abadaga to me last year was at the very least competing for, like, best mid in the league. Now I never even hear anyone talk about him. In the top 3, was barely even mentioned, maybe other than, like, oh, yeah, like, thought he would be good, but he wasn't, And then FBI was... It felt like it had gotten to the point during summer last year that it wasn't even disputable that he was the best performing bot laner, right? Like almost everyone agreed that he is the best ADC in the league. Again, where is he in the discussions? You don't even talk about him. You talk about Berserker and Hans, and that's all anyone talks about.
Who weren't in the league last year. To be fair, they weren't in the league. And so we added literally our 2 best AD carries into the mix, but also it's compounded. Yeah.
But I think they're both playing worse. They've taken themselves, it feels more like they've taken themselves out of the conversation than that they've been like pushed out by how good other people were. Because I actually don't think that like, so Berserker, I think people will point to his team fighting as incredible. I think FBI last year, you could argue, had the really good team fighting, but had better laning performances than Berserker, right? It's not apples to apples, so like I'm not really going to go down the rabbit hole too much on this. But I do think that like that is the biggest concern for me. And last year, I felt like 100 Thieves, they were the deserving winners. I do think that a few teams kind of fell apart for them to actually, win in playoffs, and some teams weren't playing as well as possible. I think teams have gotten better around them, and they have gotten worse. So it feels hard to be like, yeah, I believe in you to really challenge for the title. But they have an opportunity against C9 this last week that I think could change some minds. Like if they come in here on the 6-game winning streak and they actually like beat C9 or have a really good competitive game with C9 that's really impressive, then I think you maybe actually start changing some hearts and minds. But until then, I think no one really believes that they're going to challenge for the title.
Just a quick anecdote on the Berserker point as well, even though I know we're backing a lot into this. After watching so much Champions Queue, I actually have a lot of confidence in his lane phase. I want to see if they can bring, because in Champions Queue, like he just keeps smashing, and it's all obviously very different pairings for all these different matchups.
And it's on Winston, but it's a support thing. It's
so I want to see if they can bring his success there in lane phase to LCS.
I would like to see that in summer. I feel like I like their playstyle right now, and I don't want them to like throw a wrench in it, being like, all right, Summit, you're weak side now. Peace, buddy. Because right now the identity to me is very clear, where Summit gets the most resources both in draft and in play. Fudge and Berserker are pretty autonomous. They don't need a lot of help. And there's a lot of players, a long history of AD carries who are arguably the best in their region, and they are not lane dominant, like Reckless. Like he could be that type. Sneaky was that type. There's a lot of players in this tradition of this kind of AD carry where I don't necessarily need him to be the win con early or need resources.
He's your insurance policy.
Yeah.
So a quick thing on the resources though, for jungle proximity, Summit actually has negative jungle proximity because because opponents camp him so much.
And Blabber's actually like the lowest jungle proximity jungler in the league, I think. It might have changed, but last time I looked at it, it's like he just doesn't go to the lane unless he's killing them.
Ton of K+A.
Yeah.
Just that to me is always an impressive combination where it's like you barely play around your lanes, but you get the most kills. Yeah. Guess your ganks are pretty good,
Yeah. C9 are a bit of a weird team to talk about this, but like at least watching their games, it's clear that like the focus is on Summit in a lot of ways. So that's why like I would love to see them try to play like lane dominant at some point, but I don't know if like week 9 is when I'm like, all right, take that risk right now, changing things up. I'm scared about that.
It's always interesting, right? Because like you say, I mean, people always, I think when I say Cody Sun, people take it as like, you're like making a negative comparison. But I always thought Cody Sun like personified kind of like that style that we're talking about really well. Obviously, I don't think he's as high level player as Berserker, but like he was, I think at his best, like that kind of player where it was like, you never expected Cody to do anything in lane, but then like 25 minutes hit, you realize he's on like 3 items and you're like, oh, I guess he's just gonna like, they just win now, right? And it feels like Berserker is that to like, a higher degree where they're not really creating lane advantages. It's not necessarily trying to say he's a bad laner, but like they just don't do it. But it'll be exciting to see him match up against FBI this weekend, right? Because I do think it's not just FBI that's been getting a lot of criticism. It's been the whole bot lane. Fudge was like tweeting the thing from Big RV2, which was like kind of joking, kind of playing, but it's like talking about support play styles, right? It's like,
oh my god,
and it was like I can't remember exactly what it was. Like Core JJ is roaming, Vulcan is like I don't know,
always flanking,
and who he is always inting or whatever, right?
Oh my god,
and those are like the support play styles, and Fudge tweeted this out. It's his coach saying it, but he's tweeting it, right? So a little bit of shots fired.
I was like, oh my god, he like tweet like some private Discord because it's a screenshot of Discord message, and I was like, I don't know.
Asked him. I assume, but like either way, it was like whoa, it's like things like that are more haha funny when a team is doing really well and it doesn't feel like there's a kernel of truth. it like hurts a little bit more and it feels like more of a little stab when there's like a kernel of truth and the team's not doing as well, right? Because 100 Thieves wasn't doing as well. So Closer got in there and was defending him, which I kind of, you know, it's nice to hear your boy jump in for you. But they have that matchup coming up, so that's going to be a really, really good one. That's like
some good spice for the weekend.
Yeah,
that's my number one match I'm looking forward to for sure.
Me too.
Is Cloud9 100 Thieves. Yeah, because Closer was like that. It was basically like cringe, and we're gonna slap you this in Super Week or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one's definitely got some spice behind it. You know, we always try and build up hype matches, and we'll do like, you know, teasers and like have them players come in and, you know, comment on other player for their position or whatever. But this one is like, all right, I feel like we could just bring them in and have cameras go and. And the team trash talk will just happen.
Yeah, that actually runs. I was watching Drive to Survive, you know, the F1 doc series.
It's so good. I finished. Did you finish the most recent?
I did finish the season. Seemed so rigged, by the way, in the final race.
Okay, well, maybe we'll do
Actually rigged.
F1 podcast.
Drive to Survive spoilers real quick here, but yeah, that seemed like complete bullshit how it ended. Like
rigged.
100%. Team Toto.
yeah, me too. I actually can't stand Christian from Rebel. Anyway, so I was gonna jump into that because there was an interview format that they use, which I just thought was reminding me of like trash talk stuff, where they like do these 2-person interviews where they have like a press conference and they bring in 2 people. I don't know if you don't watch the show.
Nope.
So they bring in 2 people, but they always put like these 2 people that are like competing or like hate each other or whatever.
Yeah, or like one is taking the other person's job and they already announced it or some shit. And they have them interview together.
And they're like, well, Mark, we're here with you're on Mercedes. Well, Kobe's going to be Mercedes driver next year. Like, he's taking your job. How do you know? And so like, it just reminded me of that. Like, it would be really funny to see some of these trash talk things, but have the players sat beside each other.
My favorite.
It's pretty awkward, but also pretty good.
My favorite of that all time is the Conor McGregor press conference where, you know, they have like the 2 fighters and the guy's trying to talk smack at Conor McGregor and he's like, who the hell is this guy?
Who the fuck are you or whatever?
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, that's hilarious. All right. FlyQuest, how are we feeling? It feels like they were on a huge losing streak. You know, they went 1-1. Does anyone like kind of have hope for them as like a real competitor? Because I feel like it's interesting. They have been above EG in the standings like the whole split, but everyone talks about EG as the prospective 4th place team. FlyQuest isn't really getting that respect, right? Like they're not really being taken serious, even though we're down to the end of the split and they're still above EG. Everyone's like, yeah, but EG though, if they could be that
Friday
4th team.
matchup, EG versus FlyQuest. You guys talking about 100 Thieves, C9?
Mm-hmm.
EG FlyQuest, I feel like I always build it up in my own head as like good versus evil because they had like the opposite branding for a while. Mm-hmm. The fact that they're, like you're saying, this kind of team where EG's underperformed, but everyone just assumes they're good. FlyQuest overperforms, and everyone just waits for the other foot to drop. I think this is actually a really hype matchup for that reason. I still am of that opinion, though. I'm like, please prove me wrong, FlyQuest, but like, I can't see it.
So let me pose this really quick question, then you're gonna get in. There was an interview, I think it was with Power of Evil, I want to say, but I could be misquoting. But anyway, there was an interview like a year or 2 ago, basically talking about the fact that fans and community and stuff often won't give credit to teams that don't have big names and are doing well. Because of this kind of like this scenario, this phenomenon where it's like, if you don't know the player really well, if they're not a big star, they must be just getting lucky. And of course, they're going to start doing badly soon. Do you think there's some truth to that? Do you think that's kind of applying to FlyQuest, or is that just like,
I think there are a lot of subconscious biases that go into things like this. I can definitely see a world where that sort of aspect of psychology definitely does affect it, because human, you know, we're used to like looking for heroes or looking for things that have already been proven, and then they don't need extra reassurances. Plus, you got me thinking along the lines of like, especially bringing up the brands of even the teams themselves, because FlyQuest has been a reoccurring example of this, where they have done well in the past. They were back-to-back finals for us. Do you think of this organization or this team as a
top 2?
A top 2 or like a finals repeat organization team. I feel like people never want to give credit and again, this is mostly subconscious. It's not like they're like, you know what, fuck FlyQuest. Because generally, if you ask anyone, they're like, oh yeah, you know, that's a cool brand, save the environment. But it doesn't, because they have this like goody two shoes, nice brand, which is a unique brand. Maybe that is a contributing factor. That paired with the players that they get generally don't have super big, pre-existing brands as well themselves, is probably a reason why I feel like they're continually not getting as much praise or hype as their position in the rankings of the LCS would merit.
So I will agree and disagree. I think coming to preseason rankings, we all have FlyQuest a lot lower than they are in the standings and where we would put them now. So there's some truth to that about like the big names and what you expect to do well. I would push back against like they don't get the credit they deserve because of the big names, because there's also a long line of teams overperforming in regular season who then lose playoffs, and it's like, yeah, they weren't ever that good. We were kind of right to doubt them. Teams like Dignitas last year went 11-7 in the regular season. They didn't have any big names, and everyone's like, they're not actually that good. They're just like getting these random wins with Dardock cheese picks kind of thing. No one's expecting anything. They get into a little bit of like roster situation, and then they're out of playoffs 0-3 to 100 Thieves, and we never hear from Dignitas the rest of the year again. Like that happens a non-negligible amount of time when a team overperforms in the regular season. Playoffs rolls around, they get clapped, and it's like, well, they were never really that good.
Yep.
And so like I think that's why that FlyQuest roster that did go to finals shut everyone up in spring, because they proved that they were actually good. And then in summer, they got that respect. I remember people were hyping them up in summer, and we still talk about them to this day when you're like getting a bunch of veterans together. Is it going to be FlyQuest? Is it going to be CLG? Like we talked about Immortals being that way.
Yep.
And I think they got that to respect in the end, but you have to earn it in postseason. You can't ever get that respect of, no, you're not overperforming until you beat the people that we thought are better than you.
I just feel like though, and that FlyQuest one that we always refer to, it's cool that the quote came from Power of Evil, because he was the centerpiece for it, basically him and Santorin. I feel like if him and Santorin, or even just him as Power of Evil during that time, if he was streaming and like talking shit about the other mid laners, and or any sort of little extra like
Spice to
edge or spice, or if Santorin, Santorin also is like super, super nice. If they were more edgy at all, or if there was any kind of
like a fandom,
if there was conflict that went with it, I feel like there would have been so much of a bigger swell.
Yeah, it is really interesting, and I think like specifically like this interview was a couple years ago, so I'm not remembering exactly, but it was. Partially the idea being like, if you take a big name team, it's like if FlyQuest were to beat TSM in the finals, you would believe less in FlyQuest doing well internationally than if TSM wins. You know what I mean? Because it's like the bigger names. And I think a lot of it comes down to like these unconscious biases, like you're talking about, Kobe, where it's like, oh, I've seen Doublelift do this a lot before. Like, I know he can do it, even if he's not doing it now. Whereas like, haven't seen like Takoi do it yet. So like, maybe he's a fraud or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's this thing that kind of works in your head. But it is interesting. And I will say, one of my big takeaways from FlyQuest is that their like management and their team building deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah.
Right. Like they make lemonade out, they get lemons, they make lemonade, right?
Yes.
Like they do not have big budgets ever. And they made not only that back-to-back finals team, but like this team, I think, has already massively outperformed everyone's expectations, right? Like they're doing better than EG and TSM, which both massively outspend them.
Massively. It's not even close.
Yeah. So it's like, wow. Like you did it again. It's not a fluke, right?
And that's why I'm like, I'm like, why does this keep happening in FlyQuest? They're so nice. And like they keep on, doing a lot with a little. And I just want, there to be support, I guess, for it.
They are deserving of credit.
Yeah.
Still don't believe on them. All right.
Here's how they get credit. Beat EG this week.
NC9. They play C9, I think, too.
And call them idiots or something.
Yeah.
No, I was going to say,
flame them in all chat.
That's not going to convince me. You beat them here. You get top 4 in the regular season, so you're in the upper bracket. You're probably going to lose to someone in the upper bracket. You go to the lower bracket, you beat EG again in a best of 5 this time. And then no one can say shit to you about EG being better because you literally beat them the last couple times you played.
I mean, here's the thing. I don't believe in EG either.
Well, not for title contenders, but just between the two.
Yeah,
like EG's overrated, FlyQuest underrated, potentially. That's the narrative now. So prove it.
What if FlyQuest, and they would keep with their brand of being nice, but they would be so overly nice that it's like sarcastic flame. Maybe
EG was really going out there and trying their best.
Yeah.
You
I
can't
feel
go
like,
too hard on EG. They only spent a couple million on Impact.
I feel like this is my suggestion to try and get what kind of this edge into a brand that I think is really strong.
Yeah.
Because if I think about myself, I'm a super competitive person. Most gamers are.
Yeah.
And if you tell me good try after I just lost a game to you, I'm going to be really pissed. Like it actually gets me more angry than if you're talking shit to me and you're like, you fucking suck, Kobe. And I'm like, no, I don't. You're an idiot. Then that'll be a normal response.
I used to do that to people when we would scrim them. If I really wanted to tilt them, you'd like super slam them. They clearly had a horrible game.
Yeah.
And then I'd be like, you did really well. Like, that was one of your best games.
That was way better than I expected out of you.
I didn't think, I've never seen you get that close.
I think this is the route that they should go with because, if you tell me good try, I get so much more pissed than if you call me dog shit.
It's so funny, too, because even if you know that they're like intentionally doing it, you can't help but.
It's also like, how do you argue that? You're like, no, I'm worse than you just said I was. Like, you can't, it's like hard to rebuke.
This is a bad game for me.
FlyQuest, the overly the overly sarcastic kindness. Kill him with kindness.
There you go. It's more like kill him with condescension.
Exactly. Actually, yeah.
All right, we got an EG question here. This one comes from McNister.
Hey guys, longtime listener and big EG Jensen fan. Wanted to get your guys' take on it. I've been watching a lot of these EG games now, and they keep dropping these late game fights and losing games. And as good a player as JoJo is, he's an up-and-coming talent. I like him. His lane is great, but his team fighting just leaves me wanting more, and I feel like it's really hurting EG's late game. So I can't help but wonder if Jensen would be a fix for this, and bringing him in, they could start picking up more wins, and come summertime, make a push towards Worlds. Want to see what you guys think. Thanks.
So I tweeted before the season even started. Do you remember?
I was going to bring this up if you didn't.
Yeah. So I tweeted like, okay, if EG is really bad, how long before you think if there's EG Jensen or Niski or whatever? And this was before even lock-in or anything. Mm-hmm. Just because I was like, hey, team with a lot of money, rookie player, there's lots of available free agents. I tweeted this, and Peter Dunn was like, EG would literally have to fire me. Like, I would not allow this to ever happen. Like, JoJo is on the team and he's starting, or I'm quitting, So I think it's a big fat no.
Ever.
It's never going to happen.
So there have been a lot of coaches throwing that around. I feel like, by the way, so many coaches this year have been, I'll get fired if Golden Guardians doesn't, go whatever score, or, they'll have to fire me.
Yeah,
and I'm
Arrow said they should fire me if we don't go 11-7.
Yeah, like a lot of coaches are throwing around their careers like it's a ha-ha joke. I feel like some of them are going to start firing.
Someone's going to lose their head and be like, wait a minute, I should have said that.
They're going to stop those jokes real quick.
So on the point of the caller, okay, the coach says this isn't happening. Fair enough. But as analysts and entertaining the question, I don't see the JoJo. I feel like he's talked about all the time. He's under this microscope because he was hyped up, and I get why people are watching him extra close. But he
popped off in lock-in, right? So people are comparing. He came in hot in lock-in. He was crushing. He was talking a lot of smack, and so people put him up there.
Yeah. So from that angle, I understand it. But when you're actually diagnosing this team's problems and you're actually being like, how are they losing games? What's going wrong? I think the sad and boring answer is that their team coordination isn't that great. People underperform at different stages. JoJo is one of them, but Inspired has games where he's totally forgettable, if not outright costing the game. Their bot lane has thrown. People have made a lot of mistakes in their games, and then it feels like a lot of the times they're trying to come back off of not great early games. And so, to me, I don't get the JoJo.
You don't get why people would be like,
no,
Jensen sounds like a good plug and play for JoJo right now.
JoJo, Jensen's gonna fix Inspired's gank top when he uses a useless ward hop. I don't get that.
I do understand the frustration though of people like the caller, EG fans that are looking at these moments, because especially towards the mid and late game, when you have these team fights and these objectives, there are big moments where it's like, I've worked so much in this game to get to this point, and then there's something very easy to point to that is a mistake there. And since you've had this kind of looming Jensen over the back of every mid laner basically in the league that ever underperforms as like a question of replacement, I can definitely understand, where it comes from. At this point, and I think that they, I would have been more argumentative at the beginning in signing Jensen versus JoJo, but at this point, I think they've invested so much into, building up the talent that I think it would feel really weird to pull that switch, because it is spring and you're probably not going to MSI anyway.
Yeah.
So making that change now would be just extremely disruptive, unless you're also solving other internal problems that we don't know about. I feel like they, at this point, would be better off staying with JoJo and building towards summer, because I don't think that anyone is going to unseat, Cloud9 or possibly Team Liquid going to MSI.
Yeah.
So I agree that I probably wouldn't make the switch to Jensen, but I do understand the frustrations of, people like the caller.
I don't still. I get why there's a microscope under JoJo and people are tunneling on him, but when you actually break down, yes, I think Jensen's probably, the last time we saw him, a better player than JoJo is now. It would be an upgrade technically, but to your point about why isn't this team contesting with C9? It's not because they have JoJo.
Isn't it kind of just almost like what we just talked about with that Power of Evil interview or whatever the quote from a while ago, where it's like people are focusing on the guy that they know the least about, right? And I do think that he is getting almost an unfair amount of kind of heat, because it's like, well, I know Impact's really good. He's won a bunch of championships. He's world
Inspired
champion.
won the MVP.
Well, I know exactly. He's an MVP. Well, I saw Danny last year and he was good, and I know Vulcan's good because he was really good on Cloud9 and made it to semis. What has this JoJo guy done? But I'm with Mark, where I just think that they are playing poorly as a team. They make a lot of errors as a team, and I think that if I were actually focused one person on what my expected performance level was versus result, I would actually target Inspired. I don't think Inspired has been horrible by any means, but I thought Inspired would be coming in here and having all kinds of hype. I thought he would be way more dominant.
The first game from this last weekend, he had a super dominant one, and I saw everybody was like, all right, that's what that's
TSM
what we were
game
looking for.
2 weeks ago, same thing, where you're he runs over the whole game.
But I thought he was going to be doing that every game, because that's kind of what he did in LEC last year. It felt is every game, oh my god, Inspire's up 10 camps and he took away their whole jungle, and now he's up 3 levels and now he's running over the game, and it was kind of felt like that sort of story was really, really common. But we haven't really gotten that a lot, and of course jungle is interconnected with the whole team, right? So it's not it's you have to enable them and so on and so forth. But he was the biggest kind of gap between expectation and reality for me so far. I think Danny is the only person that I think looks better than last year. I think his laning is definitely better than, and if you want to say that's a Vulcan thing or versus Ignar or whatever. But I do think Danny's lane has improved, so I think he deserves some credit for that. So there are some things to be happy about with EG, but they just seem like a bad team. Even though they seem like good individuals, they seem like a bad team.
Yeah.
I will say Jensen has been grinding challenges queue. I thought that he was going to come in to replace somebody in this league.
TSM.
It's really, really close
so everyone
towards
thinks.
playoffs. But he is definitely grinding challenges queue. So I feel like he has at least been talking to some teams. And TSM is definitely the one that everybody has had eyes on for a while because they're in the bottom. But for me, the biggest blocker to that one is that Jensen in the past has not wanted to join bottom tier teams. And we've had this discussion as well several times, but we can keep our eyes on it.
It is interesting though, because when you're all of a sudden grinding champions queue a lot, it's maybe makes you wonder are you talking with the team and they're like, all right, show us you still got it, show us you can still do it, put in some work, get to the top, and we'll talk, right? So,
or maybe they're just hey, you'll be coming in soon, so start practicing now.
Could be that too.
Literally every day that I've watched champions queue, Jensen's been playing. So
yep. All right.
Is pretty interesting. But EG, I think they have a lot of work to do. It's again, I think a lot of this stuff can change, coming out of Super Week. If there's some really good performances, maybe teams can get things together a bit. Because EG's peak, I think, is really high. And that could be really exciting to see them get there. I'm really hoping that we have like a third, fourth team that is really competitive, because then that makes the whole playoff bracket way more exciting to be able to actually have some teams that can
I'm ready
challenge.
for playoffs, baby.
I'm just so ready for fans. By the way, if you guys didn't know, we already sold out all the playoff tickets. Only took a couple days. All playoff tickets are sold out. That is such a huge dub. Like, that is actually so exciting. I cannot wait for the studio to be packed. Hopefully we're going to have some really good series. It's going to be incredible.
If you couldn't get tickets to playoffs, then be ready.
You can watch at Kobe's house.
Yeah, come
with
to
Travi Gaffey.
Come to watch with Travis on the couch. I was gonna say we are gonna have tickets for Houston going on sale decently soon. So
And that's supposed to be a really big stadium. So
yeah,
you should
so
be, able
be
to get
on the
tickets.
lookout for those because there's a lot of seats in that stadium.
All right, moving
And
on.
stadiums are the most fun, baby.
Yes.
Moving down the rankings, Golden Guardians went 2-0, stopped their loss streak after they started inting after an Arrows interview, where I think they lost 5 in a row.
They're trying to get him fired.
They tried to get him fired. They put the hot water on him. Now they're doing well again, maybe. Who knows? This team is so up and down. We talked a lot about their throwing leads this weekend.
Are they that up and down? I feel like their early game is always good and their late game is always bad.
In terms of rankings, they started down,
Yeah.
then they won a bunch, then they lost a bunch. And so they're streaky in results. I think you can talk about their play style having some consistency.
The only thing I can think of as soon as you bring up the topic of Golden Guardians is Licorice just stomping Fake God so hard with the Fiora pick that we're casting this game, and that is the whole story for the game. And so the observers try and show us the replay of the first 1v1. They cut that replay
that
to
one
show
was
us
such a mess.
the
Oh, no.
second 1v1 in which he's killing Fake God. And then later they're trying to catch up on that one. So they get through the first one and they try and show us the replay of the second one that we missed. And it cuts to a third one where he's killing him 1v1. And it was this comical chain that we could not even finish any of these replays of him beating Fake God into another live play of him killing him again. That's all I can remember.
Fake God really griefed the first 1v1. I actually think he could have won that 1v1, but that one was a sad one because he flashed in the bush, I think, for some sort of vision play.
He had
but he was
Ignite on him.
ignited. Exactly. He's revealed. But also, he wasn't watching the timer on his ult, so his ult expired, and he just never used the Q heal. I think if he used the Q heal, his next auto actually kills Licorice, and then the game could look really different. But he really messed up in that first 1v1, and sometimes that's how top lane looks. When you play a volatile top lane matchup, like 2 split pushers, and you mess up in that first all-in, if the other person doesn't mess up, they're ahead. They're playing with that advantage for the rest of the game. If you're outscales Tryndamere in that 1v1 generally, like, you're going to have a better time as the game goes further. So especially in that matchup when you lose the first one, it's like, oh no. So that one was a rough one. But Licorice has had some really good laning performances. He's also had some rough ones, but he's had some really good laning, I think, a couple times this year.
Well, so
the Gnar game where he was up like 60 or 70 CS on Sion, I think they actually lost that game.
yep,
Yeah,
that was a 10
because
throw.
then later in the end game, he was inside enemy base and he got picked.
Yep.
So my big question is, they're 7-8. They're tied with EG at 7-8, Dig at 7-8, FlyQuest 8-7. There's just a world where they're the 4th best team in the league.
Yeah.
And we were talking about power rankings in our own head right now. Like, where do you guys put Golden Guardians? Because for me, I would honestly say it's like actually closer between them and EG. I think I like the ability to get. I would rather be, as a coach, in a position where my team I can trust to be good enough to actually get leads consistently, and I need to show up the mid game. Sure, the result might be the same, but like, if your players aren't skilled enough, it's like, well, I just can't get leads ever. At least like I know that my players are good enough to get leads. Let's like,
You'd like to be in that position as a coach. Would you say if you couldn't fix those problems that you should be fired?
probably. You'd probably let that coach go.
You have an 8th loss,
Yeah.
perhaps.
So you might be able to be in that position
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
coach.
exactly.
sometime.
Golden Guardians, let me know.
Yeah.
That's what I've been waiting to get back in the coaching game.
I mean, I think I can totally see your point where it's like, hey, they clearly have the talent to create advantages and get ahead of teams, right? I think that is the glass half full. I think the glass half empty take is that late game problems are notoriously difficult to solve because the game becomes massively more complex at the later stage, right? If your players just are terrible in lane and every player loses lane, well then it's harder to fix. But at least like setting up for like macro plays in the early game is like, all right, when it comes to 8 minutes, the Herald's going to spawn, like it's pretty simple. Late game gets a lot more complex. And I think that's where arguably the coach has a lot less control. From some of the discussions I've had with people, like a lot of people feel like that's where, in-game leadership and stuff becomes really important, because you can't prepare your players for all permutations of what the game is going to look like when it's like 30 minutes in, right? And I think that's one of the things that it can become more difficult with. And I think that's why it's been really hard for Golden Guardians to maybe fix. Like it's not an easy solve to be like, hey, in this exact situation, you have to do this thing and this thing and this thing. You can review that from a game, but you're not necessarily going to have that exact situation again.
Yeah, but okay, so this is an interesting coaching philosophy discussion, because that's where in my opinion, you're supposed to be coaching these
concepts,
philosophies and concepts towards late game that you can guide off of, because that's not even going to be a good way to coach, to be like set play for all these different things, because the biggest thing you're trying to convey to the players is the why behind decisions in the first place. So if you're approaching your coaching from trying to teach people why something is good, then I think, I feel like that should be the route. But it definitely is way more
it's just so complex in late game,
and complex than the
and if players disagree on like what is the priority in late game, how to close out games and stuff, that's where I think it can be really, really contentious and difficult. And that's my big concern with Golden Guardians. It's like, theoretically, you could look at it from the point of view of like, coming into playoffs, this team that has a really good early game, if they get sorted their late game, maybe they could like snowball some games to upset teams. Like I could see that. But I could also just see teams saying, all right, your late game is really bad. We're going to play to neutralize you in the early game. And then we're just going to like by default win in 5v5 later.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, they often take volatile, especially top matchups, and they have some more volatile junglers, and they play a more early game style. So maybe they could also, I mean, Blaze Olive usually plays scaling mid. Like I feel like their drafts usually have like, we attack this place early and then we kind of do this stuff late. So I feel like they can, I have faith in them. I believe they're going to make playoffs.
I think they'll make playoffs.
Is that faith I feel?
Well, I feel like
I have faith in them.
I feel like we have to call playoffs, right? There's this tie going on. Who's going to make it in? Who's not going to make it in? Right now, Golden Guardians is on the outside. I think they're taking someone's spot. I think Dig is doomed. Dig is giga doomed. They're playing the 3 hardest teams in the league. They're playing C9, TL, and 100 Thieves this weekend. Dig is out.
Yeah.
And so I think Golden Guardians is taking their spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I don't necessarily think I would put Golden Guardians above still like EG and FlyQuest and stuff like that. I'm not there yet.
I'm actually really interested in the early rounds of playoffs just to get some of these questions answered. The Fly versus EG one, the Golden Guardians one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if Golden Guardians can solve their late game issues, they could actually be a threat to like have one of those runs like when Golden Guardians got 4th in playoffs, right? Where they had that, where it's like you can have this dominant early game and stuff, and maybe really make something happen there. But I do think it's concerning, like some of the just that it's been all season long the same issues where they create early game leads and then they can't seem to actually close out any of these games. Like no matter how far ahead they get, it's like every game feels.
You never know.
Every game feels pretty losable, which is
never unlosable for them.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, I just part of that for me is I have very little faith in Lost. I think Lost has performed very poorly, and I think that's maybe part of the like if I'm not being just kind of like nice about it, I think that's part of their late game problems is that they don't actually have a good insurance policy because often it comes down to your marksman, and I think he plays really poorly in a lot of these late game scenarios. Like there was the 10 or 13K one
game?
against
the Kaisa game.
The Kaisa game was like that they lost against 100 Thieves from 13K up. Every single team fight that they lost, you go back and you watch, he still has his ultimate, he still has his cleanse, and he still has his flash. And he's just playing like for lack of a better word, like almost like a KDA player where it's like you are so afraid to use your gold lead to create space and to be aggressive with it. And it's just not the right way to play, especially not with Kaisa, who is about taking that edge and diving in and playing the line and being really aggressive. It's just not the champion for you if you're going to play like that.
Yeah, and it's in such stark contrast to so many of the other AD carries in our league. And I'm not even talking about the best. Berserker and Hansama, yes, they're in a league of their own. It's not fair to do comparisons, but even if you compare them to
Neos and
Luger
and
and all of these guys, they're making these super aggressive plays, trying to play on the line. But I do think maybe a lot of to the early success and lane phase of that bottom lane, I've been chalking more and more up to Ole grinding away as well, because I think he's been playing
He's
extremely
super
well.
aggressive.
Yeah, and he's been even criticized by other other supports because he's not unpredictable in that, yes, he will always play these aggressive. He will take the aggressive line in all of the options for plays, right? So if you always are tending towards being aggressive, then you're actually easier in some cases to handle than someone who is passive, because they know
Just bait him in.
what you're going to do.
Yeah.
I also tend to feel though that people just don't like playing against the crazy aggressive players.
Yeah, and so they use that as flame.
They can use that as flame because it's there's always like that little nervousness of like, Ole's gonna all in, but like if it works, then it feels like you knew he was gonna do it, so you feel like it's stupid, but it still worked, and now they're ahead of you, and then now it's a problem, right?
And you're mad.
Exactly. And so
it's basically a you mad, bro.
Yeah. So I tend to think people flame the like aggressive players as like, he's just like, he does this all in every game. Well, it's like, well, if he does that every game and you know it's gonna happen, if he's not, like, shouldn't you just be able to stop it every time? Because people aren't stopping it, right? Like it works a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I do give him credit for at least like how he's choosing the all-ins then. Because I think Ole has been really fun to watch and not talked about a ton, but like has had a very successful return to pro, right? After being out of pro a while.
Yeah.
He is super hard worker, clearly, like through his story of grinding to the top of Korean Challenger to prove to himself that he could do it. He is grinding in Champions Queue. Yep, he got second place. Largely might have been able to get first, but like it's longer queue times, I know, for support than mid, etc. So he's been fun to watch. I'm glad to have him back.
Yes, sir. Moving on to TSM 2-0 weekend. We have an anchor question from Chris Hayden.
Hey guys, after their 2-0 weekend, where would you rank TSM amongst the other teams? And if they started this split with this roster, do you think they'd make playoffs?
Still last and no. Sorry. I know it's like a hopeful,
You put them over or under Immortals after that game?
Yeah.
No.
I think I still do.
No way.
By the way, speaking of Immortals, are we back to agreeing that they're CLG?
They're CLG. Azael's right.
I was right.
Dude, they're the worst team in the league.
I was right.
They're the worst team in the league.
I have them as the worst team in the league too. I actually bumped them up enormously in the power rankings tonight. TSM.
I mean, I bumped them up to probably 9th as well. I don't know if I have that much faith in them to the caller's question about like, would they make playoffs? Like, no.
Well, if they started with this setup, which is really just takeover instead of Kaido, I guess that's the question, because like we have gotten away from Urson back to Shenyi.
I get it.
I don't know. I mean, it's tough because there's so much stuff going on with TSM. It's really hard to like say what is the cause of all these issues, because I've heard there's so much like internal drama and problems, and it's like, is this due to external stuff? Is this due to just play stuff? I don't think you could predict them to make playoffs just because it's just like there's not enough evidence to show that they can do that. But I think they at least would maybe gotten a couple more wins. But like if things are stable going into summer, I think they could look a lot better.
Yeah. So the names on paper aren't that bad, but you can't like Shenyi rando locking something on stage isn't like not going to happen because you have takeover instead of Kaido.
Yeah.
And like those problems, you don't just get to write off because they're solved now. So to that point, you have to assume everything else goes to chalk. Your mid lane's a little bit better. You pick up a couple more, maybe wins at some other points, but you're still going to have all this turmoil. Like the Peter Zhang stuff still going on, like all this stuff is still going to happen.
Yeah, that's why it's so hard to say much about it, because a lot of their issues, it feels like, are like mental almost.
Yes. So I'm not there, but I think they're much better than Immortals. I don't know how you can put them. Like that game was terrible. Immortals literally ran up and down the river 3 times at one point because they just had no vision.
Okay, fine. You're right.
All right. As long as you admit Immortals is
yeah.
All right, we're on the same page.
That, just say it with me. Immortals are CLG.
Immortals are CLG.
CLG.
I feels bad, but I feel like so clearly Immortals wanted to do this whole, split push, play through revenge type thing.
Yeah.
Feels like since the changes on, oh my God, I'm spacing out on the item, the side lane item, this will push Hullbreaker on the ranged Hullbreaker changes, where it was like they were just going Graves top every game with that, and it was actually working. Feels like since then they haven't really known exactly what to do or been able to actually have success with that playstyle. So Immortals has been a bit of a mess. I'm much more optimistic about TSM going into summer, but I don't want to rewrite history largely because what you're saying. They still had so many issues that were like independent of gameplay.
Yeah. The second part of it though, of like them being able to get into playoffs, I feel like that is such a jump because we were even having a hard problem pulling a team down out of playoffs. So like I feel like that is such a big jump, even looking at summer.
If they get a big ticket mid laner, I'm still like feel bad saying that because I think takeovers actually perform pretty well. But I do think if they got a Niski or a Jensen going into summer, then I think that kind of like helps to boost the mental and gives you a bit of that honeymoon phase. And then I could see that team being a playoff team and really making that climb. But as of right now, I think it's pretty hard to say that, even though it's still a massive jump up from where they were. Because just a couple weeks ago, it was like this team had one win and looked absolutely hopeless in almost every single one of their games. At least we have now seen a couple really nice Huni performances, some carry performances from him. It feels like these last couple weeks are the first time we've seen Huni look like Huni in the whole year, right? Well, like he's away from the like smite top stuff that I think wasn't even really working that well for them. So I'm excited to see TSM at least like looking like a bit more of a cohesive team.
Yeah, I think Houdini's actually been good even before these wins. He's been fine this year. Is there anyone else you guys want to talk about? CLG 0-2?
Modoc is closed.
You alt F4'd out?
No. Well, it signed me out, and I didn't feel like signing back in since we're at the end of the episode anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting till next week.
All right. Well,
sign back in.
That's good commitment right there. I mean, you like CLG. Contracts is your boy. Are they making playoffs? They making the run? They doomered?
Well,
they did play the top
problem for them is that they're 2 games back of even the lowest out of that pack, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And so they have to.
EG are all
I feel like they have to get a little help in Super Week with 2 of the other teams losing massively and them getting multiple wins in Super Week. So it's a lot of homework basically.
So CLG have Immortals,
TSM,
and TSM. So those they can. And then they have EG. So
I mean, it is doable.
Their schedule is very doable with help. So really, it's like 2 teams that are already up there have to have like basically an 0-3 week, likely. At best, they have to have a 1-2 week. And if that happens and CLG performs, it's actually doable based on strength of schedule.
And what I do like about the recent surgeons from CLG is that they are clearly putting these things that they practiced into every weekend of LCS. And it's like the comps are always very similar. It's Power Fox, something that can roam down or get picks towards bottom lane, towards the bottom half of the map. Like they know Luger is our win condition. This man is gold, okay? Not ranked, but like gold as in valuable, the medal. If they can invest in bottom, then he can push them across the finish line. And they've also practiced, Poom getting roam timers out of bottom lane by ganking, by putting pressure there, so that then Poom can move with Contracts for these plays in the enemy jungle. These aggressive plays that previously Contracts was doing by himself and would get picked or killed or something, right? So I do feel like there are concrete learnings and improvements for this team that they can carry over. But it is still a difficult task just because of where they're starting heading into Super
does
Week.
Make me think that it's like, hey, this is the run that I can actually see maybe happening.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would bet on it, but we already said we think Dig's pretty doomed based off schedule, right? And then really you just need either Golden Guardians or FlyQuest to go like 1-2, and if they go 1-2 and you go 3-0, then like you can potentially tie.
Dark horse prediction. EG is the one.
EG?
Yeah, FlyQuest, Golden Guardians, CLG that fall out.
Okay.
They drop FlyQuest, they drop Golden Guardians, CLG knocks them out with all the chips on the line,
That would be pretty hype because is that the final game? Yeah, it is on Sunday. They would play on Sunday. So
yeah.
It's definitely possible. I mean,
it's not going to happen, but that's the dark prediction for CLG fans.
There's the race like around that 6 is actually really interesting because a lot of these teams play each other. I mean, EG, their fate is totally in their hands, right? They play FlyQuest, Golden Guardians, and CLG, like all teams that are in that running for that last spot. So I think it's actually going to be really exciting, kind of towards the bottom end of the playoff table.
Hype Super Week.
Yep.
Hell yeah. Super week, baby. Let's get it.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us for now. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes of The Dive. Check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor.fm. Remember to continue submitting those questions. We had a bunch of good Anchor FM questions this week, so shout out to all y'all who sent them in. And keep sending us the Twitter questions, the takes. We love them all. The LCS Spring Split concludes this week. Super Week. Can't believe we made it to the end already. Starting Friday, 2:30 p.m. PST. It's TL versus Golden Guardians. Playoff race is going to come down this weekend. Don't want to miss it.